When paradise worlds fall silent, the morning light of Serenity Prime filtered through the crystal spires of the capital city, casting rainbow patterns across the gleaming streets below. Zara Velthan stood at the observation deck of the High Council Tower, watching her people go about their daily lives with the same peaceful rhythm that had defined Valerian society for over 15,000 years. Her four arms moved gracefully as she adjusted the viewing scope, her silver skin shimmering in the gentle sunlight. Like all Valerians, Zara possessed an ethereal beauty that came from millennia of evolution, on a world without predators, without conflict, without the harsh pressures that shaped other species. Her large, luminous eyes reflected the tranquility of her surroundings, but today they held something else, a growing concern that gnawed at her usually serene mind. "Council Member Velthan," came a melodic voice behind her. Zara turned to see Kef Mordain, the youngest member of the High Council, approaching with the flowing gait typical of their species. "The emergency session is about to begin." Zara nodded, her expression grave. "Have there been any new developments?" Kef's normally bright complexion darkened. "3 more systems have gone silent. The Harmony Collective, the Peaceful Union, and..." He paused, his voice catching. "The Garden Worlds Federation." The weight of those words settled heavily on Zara's shoulders. Each of those civilizations represented billions of lives, entire cultures that had existed for thousands of years, now reduced to nothing more than empty space and dying stars. They walked together through the graceful corridors of the tower, passing murals that depicted the history of their people, a history unmarked by war, violence, or strife. The Valerians had achieved interstellar travel not through military necessity, but through curiosity and the desire to share their peaceful ways with others. They had built their civilization on cooperation, understanding, and the belief that all intelligent life was inherently good. That belief was being tested now. The High Council chamber was a marvel of Valerian architecture, with curved walls that seemed to grow organically from the floor, creating a space that promoted harmony and calm discussion. 12 council members sat in their traditional circle, their faces bearing expressions of concern and confusion that were foreign to their usual serenity. "The reports are confirmed," announced Elder Thess Corvain, the oldest and most respected member of the council. Her voice carried the weight of centuries, but today it trembled slightly. "The harvesters have consumed the Kepler 442 system. Nothing remains but stellar debris and a dying star." Zara took her place in the circle, her mind processing the implications. The harvesters, ancient machines of unknown origin that had suddenly appeared from the depths of space 3 months ago. They moved through star systems like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Planets, asteroids, space stations, entire populations. Nothing was spared. They left behind only hollow husks of worlds and stars drained of their energy. "What? Do we know about their technology?" asked Council Member Ren Velmoss, his usual composure cracking slightly. "Our scientists have analyzed the energy signatures," Zara replied, activating a holographic display in the center of the circle. The image showed massive geometric shapes, each larger than a moon, moving through space with terrifying purpose. "The harvesters appear to be self-replicating machines. They break down matter at the molecular level and use it to build more of themselves." The council members observed the hologram in silence, their faces reflecting the horror of what they were witnessing. For a species that had never known violence, the concept of such deliberate destruction was almost incomprehensible. "Surely the Galactic Assembly will act," said Council Member Lyra Sovthan, her voice hopeful. "The advanced civilizations have ships, weapons, defenses." Elder Thess's expression grew even more grave. "I have been in communication with the Assembly. For weeks the response is disappointing." She activated another display showing messages from various galactic civilizations. One by one she read them aloud. "The Crystalline Imperium regrets that they cannot provide military assistance. The Wise Ones of Andromeda suggest negotiation. The Trade Federation has recalled all their ships to defend their core worlds." "They're abandoning us," whispered Kef, his young voice filled with disbelief. "They're protecting themselves," Zara corrected, though her tone held no judgment. The harvesters have proven unstoppable. Every military force that has engaged them has been destroyed. The advanced civilizations are cutting their losses. The chamber fell silent as the reality of their situation settled over them. The Valerians had no military to speak of. Their security forces were trained only to handle minor disputes and natural disasters. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, not warfare. They had no weapons, no defenses, no concept of how to fight an enemy that seemed unstoppable. "What about evacuation?" asked Council Member Jax Tervos. "Can we move our population to safer systems?" "Where?" Zara replied. "The harvesters appear to be moving in a pattern that will eventually encompass this entire region of space. There is nowhere to run." Elder Thess stood slowly, her ancient form still graceful despite the weight of age. "Then we must prepare for the inevitable. Our people should know the truth. They should have time to say goodbye, to find peace in their final moments." "Wait," Zara said suddenly, her mind racing. "There is one option we haven't considered." The Council turned to look at her, hope flickering in their eyes. "The deep space communication array," she continued. "We could send a distress signal beyond the mapped regions of space, to systems we've never contacted." "To whom?" asked Elder Thess. "The Assembly has already refused to help." "To anyone who might listen," Zara replied. "The galaxy is vast. There may be civilizations out there that we've never encountered, species that have the capability to help us." Council Member Wren shook his head. "The unmapped regions are designated as dangerous. Death worlds, hostile environments, primitive species. There's a reason we've never made contact." "What do we have to lose?" Zara asked, her voice growing stronger. "We're facing extinction. Perhaps it's time to reach out to those we've always avoided." The debate that followed was intense by Valerian standards, though it would have seemed like a gentle discussion to any other species. In the end, desperation won over caution. The Council authorized the use of the deep space array, despite the enormous energy cost and the uncertain nature of who might receive their message. 3 days later, Zara stood in the communication facility, on the outskirts of the capital. The deep space array was a marvel of Valerian technology, a network of crystalline structures that could transmit signals across vast distances through subspace. The facility's chief engineer, Tan Velcours, worked frantically to prepare the array for its unprecedented use. "The power requirements will drain our city's energy reserves," Tan warned. "We'll lose life support, transportation, everything." "The harvesters will be here in 6 days," Zara replied. "We won't need those systems much longer." As the array powered up, Zara composed their message. It couldn't be complex. They had no way of knowing what species might receive it, what languages they might speak, or what concepts they might understand. Instead, she crafted something simple, universal, desperate. "We are dying. Our worlds are being consumed. We cannot fight. Please help." The message was encoded in mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and basic geometric patterns, the universal language of intelligence. It repeated over and over, broadcasting into the depths of space toward systems marked on their charts as inhospitable, dangerous, or primitive. For hours, the array transmitted. Then, just as the power reserves reached critical levels, something unexpected happened. A signal bounced back, crude, powerful, but unmistakably a response. "This is the human colony ship New Frontier," came the translated message. "We received your distress call. We're coming to help." Zara stared at the communications display, her 4 hearts racing. Humans. She had heard of them, vaguely. They came from a world designated as Sol 3, a death world in the Forbidden Regions. A planet of extreme gravity, violent weather, and dangerous life forms. The few references to them in Valerian databases were warnings to avoid contact. "Engineer Tan," she called out, her voice shaking. "Can you trace the source of that signal?" Tan worked quickly at his console. "Yes, but a council member, according to our charts, they're coming from deep in the Death World sector. Sol 3 is classified as a hostile environment. The species there are supposedly primitive, aggressive, dangerous. Zara looked up at the ceiling, beyond which lay the vast expanse of space where the harvesters were approaching. Perhaps that's exactly what we need. The message exchange continued for several hours. The humans asked for details about the harvesters, their capabilities, their location. They requested star charts, technical specifications, and population data. Their questions were direct, practical, and focused on information that the Valerians found surprisingly relevant. They're asking about our defensive capabilities, Tan reported. They want to know about our military forces. Tell them the truth, Zara said. We have none. The response came quickly. Understood. We're accelerating our approach. ETA 72 hours. 72 hours. The harvesters would arrive in 6 days. If the humans kept their word, they would have 3 days to prepare for whatever was coming. Zara left the communication facility and returned to the capital, her mind filled with questions and concerns. She had initiated contact with a species that every database warned against. She had potentially invited something as dangerous as the harvesters themselves to their world. But as she looked up at the night sky, where the first hints of the harvesters' energy signatures were beginning to dim the stars, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The humans were coming. Whatever they were, whatever they might bring, they had answered when no one else would. They had heard the cry of a dying civilization and chosen to respond. In the distance, she could hear the harmonious songs of her people, still believing in peace, still trusting in the goodness of the universe. Soon they would learn that salvation might come from the very darkness they had always feared. The stars above seemed to pulse with anticipation, and somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the harvesters continued their inexorable approach toward Serenity Prime. When Deathworlders arrive, the first sign of the human arrival wasn't the traditional shimmer of a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Instead, it was a series of massive energy discharges that lit up the night sky like artificial lightning. Zara Velthan watched from the observation deck as the human vessel, New Frontier, materialized in their system with a violence that made her delicate nervous system recoil. The ship itself was unlike anything in Valerian records. Where their vessels were graceful, flowing constructions of crystal and organic curves, the human ship was angular, brutal, and scarred. Its hull bore the marks of countless impacts, and strange protrusions extended from its surface like weapons or sensors. It was clearly built for survival in harsh conditions. Every line speaking of a species that had learned to fight for its existence. Council Member Velthan, came Kef's voice over the communication system. The humans are requesting permission to land. They say they need to assess the situation on the ground. Zara hesitated. The ship's appearance was intimidating enough, but the thought of actually meeting these beings face to face filled her with a primal fear that her species had rarely experienced. Grant them permission. Direct them to the main plaza. As she made her way to the plaza, Zara's mind raced with the implications of what was about to occur. The harvesters were now only 4 days away. Their energy signatures were visible even during the day, causing distortions in the atmosphere that made the sky flicker ominously. The human arrival represented their only hope, but it also represented the first time in millennia that her people would encounter a species evolved for violence. The plaza was filled with curious Valerians, their silver forms creating a shimmering crowd as they waited to see the aliens who had answered their call. Elder Thess and several other council members stood near the center, their expressions a mixture of hope and apprehension. The human shuttle descended with a mechanical roar that made many Valerians cover their sensitive hearing organs. It landed, heavily, scorching the crystal pavement beneath it. For several long moments nothing happened. Then, with a hiss of escaping atmosphere, the shuttle's door opened. The first human to emerge was clearly their leader, a tall figure in dark clothing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even from a distance, Zara could see the differences that marked this species as products of a death world. The human's body was thick, dense with muscle and bone that spoke of evolution under crushing gravity. Their movements were controlled, but powerful, like a predator constantly ready to strike. Commander Sarah Chen stepped onto the plaza and immediately surveyed the crowd with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail, every potential threat or advantage. Her gaze swept over the Valerians with an intensity that made many of them step back involuntarily. Behind her emerged three other humans, Dr. Marcus Webb, whose instruments were already taking readings of the environment, Captain Jake Morrison, whose hand never strayed far from something that was clearly a weapon, and Sergeant Liu, whose scarred face and mechanical arm spoke of battles survived. "Greetings," Commander Chen said, her voice carrying through a translation device that rendered her words in the musical tones of the Valerian language. "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Human Colonies. We received your distress signal." Elder Thess stepped forward, her ancient grace making her seem to float across the plaza. "We are grateful for your response, Commander. I am Elder Thess, Corvain of the High Council. We are in desperate need of assistance." As the two leaders spoke, Zara found herself studying the humans with a mixture of fascination and horror. Their faces were asymmetrical, marked by sharp angles and predatory features. Their eyes were small and focused, designed for hunting rather than the wide, gentle vision of her people. Their hands ended in blunt digits that looked capable of crushing delicate Valerian bones without effort. Dr. Webb was taking detailed scans of the gathered Valerians, his equipment humming with alien technology. "Commander," he said quietly, "their bone density is approximately 1/3 of human standard. Muscle mass is minimal. They're clearly adapted for low gravity and peaceful environments." "Fragile," Captain Morrison added, his tone clinical but not unkind. "They wouldn't survive 5 minutes on Earth." Zara felt a chill at those words. These beings came from a world so harsh that her people couldn't even imagine surviving there. Yet here they were, offering help to complete strangers. "Tell us about these harvesters," Commander Chen said, her attention focused entirely on the tactical situation. "What are their capabilities? How do they attack? What's their pattern of movement?" Elder Thess activated a holographic display, showing the path of destruction the harvesters had carved through space. "They appear to be self-replicating machines. They consume everything: planets, stars, entire populations. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate. They simply consume and move on." Commander Chen studied the display with the intensity of a warrior analyzing a battlefield. 7 main units, each approximately 50 kilometers in diameter. They move in formation, suggesting some form of coordination. Energy signatures indicate they're drawing power from the stars they consume. "Our scientific analysis suggests they're at least 10,000 years more advanced than anything in our databases," Zara added, stepping forward despite her fear. "Every military force that has engaged them has been destroyed." The humans exchanged glances, and Zara caught something in their expressions that chilled her. They weren't intimidated by the odds. If anything, they seemed to be calculating angles of attack. "Commander," Dr. Webb said, "if these machines are as advanced as they appear, conventional weapons may not be effective." "Then we don't use conventional weapons," Commander Chen replied. "We use what we always use, our advantages." "Which are?" Elder Thess asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Morrison smiled, and the expression was so predatory that several Valerians gasped. "We're unpredictable, we're desperate, and we're very, very good at breaking things that aren't supposed to be broken." Over the next few hours, the humans transformed the peaceful plaza into something resembling a military command center. They set up equipment that projected 3-dimensional tactical displays, established communication links with their ship, and began planning with an efficiency that amazed and terrified the Valerians in equal measure. "The harvesters move in formation," Commander Chen explained to the assembled council, her finger tracing paths through the holographic display. "They maintain specific distances from each other, suggesting they need to coordinate their activities. If we can disrupt that coordination, how do you propose to do that?" asked Council Member Wren, his voice shaking slightly. "We target their communication systems," Captain Morrison replied. "Every hive mind has a control node. We find it, we destroy it. Zara felt sick at the casual way the humans discussed destruction and death, but to get close enough to attack them you would need to sacrifice the ship, Commander Chen finished. Yes, that's the plan. The plaza fell silent. The Valerians stared at the humans in shock, unable to comprehend the casual acceptance of such a fate. You would die, whispered Elder Thess. All of you would die. Maybe, Commander Chen replied with a shrug. But you would live. That's what matters. Dr. Webb leaned forward, his expression gentle but determined. Commander, we need to evacuate as many Valerians as possible. Our ship can carry approximately 50,000 refugees. 50,000? Kef's voice cracked. But there are over 2 billion of us on this world alone. The humans exchanged glances again, and Zara saw something in their faces that made her step back. It was acceptance. The cold, hard acceptance of a species that had learned to make impossible choices. We'll save who we can, Commander Chen said simply. The rest, we'll make sure their sacrifice means something. As the day wore on, Zara watched the humans work with a terrible efficiency. They modified their ship's weapon systems, prepared evacuation protocols, and calculated trajectories with the precision of beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for war. But it was the small moments that revealed the true nature of these Deathworlders. She saw Captain Morrison gently helping an elderly Valerian to safety when the ground shook from a harvester probe. She watched Dr. Webb patiently explaining evacuation procedures to frightened children, his harsh features softening with unexpected kindness. She observed Commander Chen standing alone, staring up at the approaching threat, her shoulders bearing the weight of decisions that would determine the fate of an entire civilization. On the final day, as the harvesters entered the system and began their approach to Serenity Prime, the humans made their final preparations. The new frontier lifted off with 50,000 Valerian refugees, leaving behind the 4 humans who would attempt the impossible. Why? Zara asked Commander Chen as they stood in the plaza, watching the dark shapes of the harvesters blot out the stars. Why would you sacrifice yourselves for us? Commander Chen was quiet for a long moment, her predator's eyes reflecting the light of dying stars. Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light, she said finally. Because that's what humans do. The battle that followed was brief, but devastating. The humans used their ship's weapons to target the central harvester, exploiting a weakness in its energy distribution system that only a species bred for war could have identified. The explosion that followed lit up the night sky, taking the human ship and its crew with it. But it worked. The harvesters, deprived of their coordination, turned on each other in confusion before finally drifting apart, their threat neutralized. In nature, the aftermath, as the Valerian refugees returned to their damaged but surviving world, Zara stood once again on the observation deck. The humans had saved them, but at a cost that her people would never forget. They had been rescued by beings they had been taught to fear, saved by violence they couldn't comprehend, preserved by a sacrifice they could never repay. The stars above shone brighter now, no longer dimmed by the harvester's hunger. But in their light, Zara saw a new truth, that sometimes salvation came from the darkness and sometimes the monsters were the ones who saved you. The humans were gone, but their legacy remained. The Valerians had learned that the universe was more complex than they had believed, that strength and gentleness could coexist, and that sometimes those marked as dangerous were the only ones brave enough to stand against the true threats. As she watched the stars, Zara whispered a prayer of gratitude to the Deathworlders who had given everything to preserve the light of Serenity Prime. They had regretted nothing, even as they faced certain death. They had answered the call, kept their promise, and saved a civilization that had considered them monsters. In the end, perhaps that was the most human thing of all.